Welcome to EPG Pathashala, the lecture series in computer science for the PG program. This is the compiler design course and this is module 27, where we will be discussing about generating 3 address code for switch case statements and statements involving mixed operands, and then finally we will also take a look at runtime storage management. So, to start with, the learning objectives of this module are to learn to generate 3 address code for switch case statement, to learn to handle mixed operands in expressions, and to understand the runtime memory management. So, we will also discuss about the various parameter passing techniques which is to be handled by a particular programming language. So, with that let us just look at mixed mode Boolean expressions. So, Boolean expressions can have arithmetic sub expressions, that is the Boolean can basically be considered as an arithmetic in languages where true is 1 and false is 0. So, some languages anything that is going to be positive is typically considered as true, and anything that is non-positive or greater than 0 can be considered as negative as false. Some languages on the other hand true is typically depicted as a value 1 and false is depicted as value 0. Now, in these situations you can consider arithmetics involving Boolean expressions also where you can basically perform arithmetic operations rather than just plain Boolean operations only. In addition, short circuits could also be considered for generating 3 address code that involves mixed mode of operands. So, let us look at this. E produces E plus E, E produces E and E, E produces E relop E and ID finally. Now, here this expression and expression basically is going to basically will be a Boolean expression, and here I can also replace this E with the E plus E. Now, this E, okay, one of the E's here in the arithmetic expression could be actually a E relop E, okay, that is an ID relop ID situation also. In that case, how do we generate 3 address code is what we are going to look in this particular module. So, here E plus E could produce an arithmetic result, and that could be AND with another Boolean expressions result. So, that is also possible. So, here if we consider this expression E produces E and E, in that case the LHS E could be a arithmetic expressions result, and that should be AND with another E. So, in that case how do I basically relate? So, here this expression E will so for example say it could be a positive value or a negative value, because it is E plus E, right. I mean it is addition of two numbers. So, that can basically be a negative or a positive value. If it is negative, how do I deal? If it is positive, how do I deal? That is what we are going to look at. And this E on the other hand could basically be a result of a Boolean expression. So, in that case also how do I going to handle it? So, this is what we are going to see here, and the 3 address code for this particular scenario involving E produces E1 plus E2. Okay. So, first we define the LHS variable E that corresponds to type arithmetic. So, we already know that every non-terminal has a type, a place and a value as attributes. So, here the LHS non-terminal corresponds to an arithmetic type, that is what we are assigning first. So, whatever be the RHS expressions type B, the result of this computation will basically be a arithmetic type. Now, supposing if I have here E produces E1 and E2, the LHS type E will be of type Boolean. So, whether expression 1 is arithmetic or Boolean, expression 2 is arithmetic or Boolean, if I am going to do a addition, LHS E corresponds to an arithmetic type. On the other hand, if this is going to be of type Boolean and this is going to be of type arithmetic, it will be what that we will see now. On the other hand, if I am joining these two with a Boolean operator AND or, the LHS E corresponds to of type Boolean. So, that is what we are trying to look at here as 3 address code. On that, so if you will check the type of the LHS RHS variables E1 and E2, if E1 dot type is equal to arithmetic and E2 dot type is also equal to arithmetic, then what do you do? It is similar to a simple generating 3 address code for an expression involving addition operator. So, here E produces E1 plus E2. So, I define a new place for the LHS non-terminal. I will generate code for E1, generate code for E2, and then I will generate E dot place is equal to E1 dot place plus E2 dot place. This is very simple. This is similar to the previous one. On the other hand, if E1 dot type is equal to arithmetic and E2 dot type is equal to bool. That is, one is arithmetic, other is bool. Now I can also do a reverse. If E1 could be bool and E2 could also be arithmetic. So whatever it is, the same logic holds good. So in that case, what you do is you generate the LHS non-terminal having a new temporary variable, and you also generate E2 dot type. E2 can be either true or false, right? So in that case, you define E2 dot true and E2 dot false will be having two new labels, okay? And first you generate code for E, you generate code for E1, and you generate code for E2, okay? Then what we do is you generate E2 dot true is equal to, if generate E2 dot true is equal to E dot place will be E1 dot place plus 1. That is, under the true label, okay, under the true label this will be some L1, L2, etc. Okay. So if under L1, what you should do is increment E1 by 1. That is because E2 is true. If E2 is true, then you increment it by 1. If E2 is false, then you have to retain the value of LHS E as the same value of E1. So this is what is the three steps to 3 address code here. So first is I am defining two new labels L1 and L2, for example say, corresponding to E2 dot true and E2 dot false. So under E2 dot true's label, you should generate the code as, okay, so this will be translated to L1. L1 is your label. This is the colon that is corresponding to every label. And under that I have to generate 3 address code as E dot place is equal to, that is LHS non-terminals place, that is a new temporary variable, right? So that is equal to E1 dot place plus 1, and I will say go to next state plus 1, meaning that I have to jump this statement in that particular case, okay, and then go to the statement following this particular arithmetic, okay. And on the other hand, if it is false, I simply say E dot place is equal to E1 dot place. So this is one more situation. I can keep on concatenating this. If E1 dot type is equal to bool and E2 dot type is equal to arithmetic, I have to do the reverse. And if both are boolean, how do I handle it? If both are boolean, what will I do? I will simply say E2 dot true, under the true label, I have to consider 4 cases. E1 could be true, E2 could be true, E1 could be false, E2 could be false, etc. Depending upon that, I will either retain the same value if one of them is false. I will retain the count as 2 if both are true, and I will retain the value as 0 if the count is going to be, if both are going to be false. Okay. If one of them is true, I will increment it by 1. If the other, if both are false, I will simply have the same value. So that could be your computation. So after that, that is one just extra information that we should know while handling mixed operands involving expressions. Now switch case statements typically will have a following syntax, that is you will have a switch on expression, you will basically switch, and then there will be a begin, and you will have so many cases here. Under each case you will have a corresponding statement. Now the statement will be typically ended up with a break, meaning that I will typically evaluate only one statement as part of the body of the switch. Okay. So in that case what happens, supposing it matches with the first value, I will evaluate only the first statement. After that I have to come out of the switch case construct itself. So and then finally you can also have a default, which means that if any of these cases do not match, I will have a default statement that will be executed, and then I'll have I need not have a break here because anyway it's going to come out of it. Okay, now this is a typical switch case construct. So in that case what we do is we evaluate the expression, find which value in the list of cases is the same as the value of the expression, execute the statement associated with the particular value found, that is the 3 steps, and then come out of it. Now this is the sequence code to evaluate E into T, that is compute the expression, generate the code for the same, and then put the result in a variable called as T, and then you have to go to test. Now this is what is the first 2 lines of your 3 address code. Then I will have label L1 corresponds to code for S1, that is the first statement corresponding to S. This is the first case, and then I have to skip all the statements. So I will say here go to next. Okay. Similarly, if it is matching with L2, I will have code for S2 and I will say go to next. So I will keep on going. Finally, I will have code for Sn, go to next, and then under the label test, what will I have is if T is equal to V1, that is what is T actually, T corresponds to the variable under which I have evaluated the expression E and stored the result. So, if t is equal to V1, I will say go to L1. If t equal to V2, I will say go to L2, t equal to V3, go to L3, etc. So, finally, I will have a next. So, I will first evaluate the expression, put it in a value and simply issue a command to go to this particular label. Once I come to the test label, that will be a sequence of if and a go to, okay, it will be a conditional jump, and the default here is go to Ln. So, I can go to any one of the L1s also, Li's only, and after Li is done, I will have a go to next, which means it is going to come to this particular expression. It is going to come to the last line, that is the outside the body of your switch case. Now, this is what is going to be part of the 3 address code corresponding to a switch case statement. So, it is mapped to a sequence of if and a go to, and then I will evaluate only one particular body rather than looking at all situations. So, I can do that by issuing so many go tos after, I mean one go to after every body of the case statement basically. Okay. So, that is what I have. Now, after this the compiler has to map so much of runtime storage. Now, so far we have discussed the scanner, the lexer and the parser, okay, and then we have basically determined how do I do perform type checking when it comes to semantic phase of the compiler, and then the fourth phase simply converted your input into another representation which is called as 3 address code representation. Now, in all these scenarios I have to manage memory, and in memory management I should also use memory wisely so that it will be useful while generating the final code or the assembly level code corresponding to the input 3 address code. So, before we move on to code generation, that is from the intermediate code to the final assembly level code, we will look at how to manage runtime storage in the context of the compiler. Now, we need to use memory to store code, the input code, the static data, that is the global variables and the local variables, and then the dynamic data objects, that is data that are used when executing a certain procedure, as well as data which is going to be used by the dynamically allocated objects using malloc and free. Now, this is the layout of memory where your initial portions correspond to the code, and then I will have the static data, that is the memory are allocated for static data, and then I will have here stack memory. My stack memory starts from here and it keeps growing towards down, okay, but it is a stack memory, therefore, at any particular point of time I will remember only the top of the stack, okay, and then I will have heap memory here. Heap memory is basically going to grow up from the last towards the stack memory area. So, what happens here is it is a stack memory. Memory is created here when there is a procedure call involved. So, this is typically your calling stack mechanism. On the other hand, you will have heap memory for dynamic objects, that is when you do a malloc, when there is a user who is requesting for memory using malloc or using realloc or calloc or new, okay, in that case you have to basically allocate memory from this area which is called as heap memory. So, stack memory is done is the area which basically gets created during compile time, during runtime by the compiler for function calls. This is given by the compiler to the user when there is going to be a explicit request for memory using malloc or new. Now, this memory is managed using what is called as an activation record. Activation records are also called as frames. Now, information required by a single execution of procedure is available in the activation record. Now, there is a calling stack. When a function A calls another function B, the arguments are getting created. Okay, what should happen when a function A function A calls function B? Whatever it is executing has to be stored. It might be using some registers, it might be using some variables, it might be using some area of memory. All those things should basically be saved, and you will have a program counter which is going to be scanning through the next instruction, etc. That should also be saved. After that, when you go to a call, the called function will also be having the same set of variable names, okay, but they will be allocated at different memory, okay. So, how do I remember those? So, I should call all these information corresponding to the caller, and the callee's information should basically be brought for execution. Okay. After the callee is done with an execution, we have to basically return to the next statement corresponding to the caller. So this is what we already talked about with reference to managing multiple symbol tables for multiple functions. Now these in addition to these multiple symbol tables and multiple functions, so there is a function, there is a symbol table for every function. But in addition to that, how do I ensure that the register contents are not messed up? How do I ensure that the registers are having only the current data pertaining to the function which is going to be at present executing? Okay. So for that only we are going to use this activation record basically. It contains all the information necessary for a single execution of a procedure. Now a general activation record has got 7 fields. Now the 7 fields are basically, the first field is called as return value, the second field is called as the actual parameters, third field is called as an optional control link, an optional access link, machine status, and these two are local variables and temporaries. Now the return value is what should be returned to the caller. Okay. The actual parameters are what arguments does this function gets called with. Okay. So for example, A calls B with 2 arguments, for example 5, 4. Actual parameters are going to be 5, 4, that is available in the activation record. And then I have the optional control link, which will be a pointer to some location somewhere, which is referring to some other module. And I can also have an optional access link, which is going to be accessing some other area of memory. And the machine status here refers to the current status of the registers of the called function, as well as what is the program counter information. All the register status contents, everything is stored in the machines in this particular field. And then this local variables and temporaries correspond to the called functions local variables. For example, again A calls B, B might be having some set of local variables, right. So that is stored here, and then the temporaries that is part of the function B in our example is also available in this area. So temporaries could be T1, T2, whatever we are creating with reference to called function. Okay. Now using these 7 fields, your memory is basically managed with reference to static allocation, with reference to stack allocation, and with reference to heap allocation. So the first one is static allocation, stack allocation, and heap allocation, 3 regions of memory management. The static allocation, it's the lays out storage for all data objects at compile time itself. So the information is done in the compile time itself, because it's going to be static memory, int A of 100. So I want a space for 100 integers, which is going to be an array. So if I say int A, and if I do everything at before even compile time without even realizing how much memory is actually required, so you will have basically this is referred to as static allocation. So that is allocated just below the code itself. Okay. The constraints of this particular approach are the size of the object must be known, and alignment requirements must be known at compile time itself, and so no recursion and no dynamic data structures basically permitted here. So recursive calls, how do we handle it? That is not permitted. And dynamic data structure also is basically not permitted with reference to static allocation. It should be all known. So for example, if I want to declare some 100 structures, 100 structure records, I should, if I want to increment to 101 also, I cannot do it without compiling the code. So therefore this is not going to be of great use, but it is okay for defining local variables and some indexing variables, etc. Now stack allocation is manages the runtime storage as a stack. Again, its organization itself is a stack. The activation record is pushed on as a function is entered. The activation record is popped off as a function exits. So when a function is getting called, the activation record or the corresponding function is pushed into the stack, and then a new function's activation record is basically created and put it on the stack. Okay. Once that function is basically done, that activation record corresponding to the particular function is also popped. So the constraints here are values of locals cannot be retained when an activation ends. For example, if this is called as basically a dangling problem. So where you might be referring to a location in the caller basically, where the callee would have already terminated. So once the callee is terminated, the caller cannot access the location of the callee's information. So that can basically happen with reference to stack allocation, and this is typically a called activation cannot outlive a caller. So, the callee has to die before the caller basically dies. So, that is why this is going to be of not much information. So, when A calls B, if B is getting some variable, and if I want to add refer to the address of the variable by A, okay, that cannot happen, because once B returns, the address which B has created basically is gone. So, therefore, A cannot access that. So, that is called as the that is a problem here, because the called activation cannot outlive a caller. On to heap allocation, this is typically done with reference to dynamic allocation. So, where it is during your malloc or new call, this is basically done. Allocates and deallocates storage as needed at runtime from a data area called as heap. Now, this heap is basically from the bottom to top, as you could already recollect, and it does not require the activation of procedures to be last in first out, that is it is not a stack procedure, and it requires true dynamic memory management. So, you normally have to give a request using a new or a malloc depending upon which programming language you are trying to use, and then once you are done with that memory, you have to specifically deallocate it using either a delete command, delete function, or a free function basically. If you do not delete it or free, then the heap area gets increased, and at one particular point of time, of course not now, in earlier days there will not be any memory to allocate to the user at all. So, in that case malloc would fail, but that is not the scenario nowadays. So, it is okay, but still it is going to be resulting in garbage, okay, garbage area getting created. Let us take this example. It is a sorting example where it is a quicksort example. So, you read an array, you call function partition, and then you call the procedure quicksort, and then inside quicksort again partition is getting called, and then you have two calls to quicksort. This is recursive call to quicksorts. So, this is done, and what happens here is, this is what happens. So, main is going to call quicksort, okay, with 1,9. Quicksort in turn carries out calls partition with 1,9, and for example partition returns some index, okay. So, say for example it is going to return now 4 here. In that case quicksort is called with the LHS as 1,3 again. So, partition calls with 1,3, and then if it returns a split as 0, it is going to be computing it as 1, I mean if it returns 1 as the position. So, partition will return basically a index of a particular element between 1 and 3. If it returns 1, then quicksort will be called with 1, 0. So, in that case basically this function will terminate. So, how is stack memory managed? Okay, now here in this example we know that once this is done, when this quicksort is called, it is pushed onto the stack, okay, calling partition. When partition terminates, when partition is called, I create a stack for I create an activation record for partition, and then when this partition returns, the corresponding activation record is moved off the stack, and then, but of course this quicksort call is still available. This quicksort is going to call this quicksort call. So, once this quicksort call again is called, this partition is called. Once partition returns, this basically is taken off the stack, again that will call quicksort. Once this quicksort is called, again one more activation record is created, but this will simply terminate because the there is no range to perform quicksort at all. So, it will terminate. Once this terminates, it will basically the activation record corresponding to this is taken off the stack. So, then this will call the next there are 2 quicksort calls, right. So, it is going to call one more quicksort call which with 2, 3 as the argument. So, when a function is called, the activation record is pushed onto the stack. When the function terminates, the activation record is taken off the stack. How is this memory managed? Is everything must be done by the compiler, and what makes this happen is known as the calling sequence. The calling sequence determines how to implement a particular procedure call. A calling sequence allocates an activation record, and that and it enters information into its field, that is whatever is necessary as per the activation record 7 fields. Now, after that it pushes that onto the stack, and then as you could see the activation record has got 7 fields, right. The first 2 fields are the return value and the actual parameters. Now, these 2 fields will be accessed by the caller very frequently, that is return value, it should get it back from the callee, and parameters it has to give it to the callee. So those two are closer to the caller's activation record. It's a stack. So when you remember an activation record here, there is one more activation record above this basically. So the first two fields will correspond to the callee's activation record. Okay. So that is closer with the caller. The callee's, those two fields are closer with the caller, and the last two fields, which is going to basically be the temporaries and local variable, that is much far away from the caller's information. So on the opposite of the calling sequence is called as return sequence. The return sequence restores the state of the machine so that the calling procedure can continue execution. So what happens here? The machine status is stored in the activation record of the callee. So in that case, what happens? The function terminates, return value field is filled, and then the registers are stored back with the information that is available in the activation record, and then the control is transferred to the caller, and then the activation record of the callee is basically popped off the stack. The caller evaluates actuals and push the actuals on the stack. The caller saves return address, the old value of stack pointer into the stack, and the caller increments a stack pointer. The callee saves registers and other status information, and the callee initializes local variables and begin execution. This is what we have just now seen. And then on return sequence, the callee places the return value next to the activation record of the caller. So as you could see, the return value of the callee's field is very close to the activation record of the caller. It's a stack. So first is going to be the return value, last field will be local variables and temporaries corresponding to the caller. Then subsequently, when the callee is pushed, it is pushed here. So the first two fields, which happens to be the return value and the argument, the parameters, that is closer to the caller. So the callee restores other registers and stack pointer and return basically. The caller copies the return value to its activation record. So the next one is access to non-local variables. Non-local variables in C, it still have nested scopes. Solutions will be all data declared outside procedures are static, that is your assumption. Other names must be at the activation record at the top of the stack, can be accessed from stack pointer. So treat here block is treated as a parameterless procedure basically, and I allocate space for all blocks in a procedure. Okay, so if P is nested immediately within Q in the source text, then the access link in an activation record for P points to the access link in the record for the most recent activation of Q. So this is what is the function of the access link and control link basically. So and then we have, when we said we are going to pass parameters. Now the parameters are typically passed using what is called as 4 methods. Okay, the 4 methods basically tries to associate actual parameters with the formal parameters. Okay, now the parameter passing method will affect the code generated obviously and the result of course. So the techniques are typically call by value, call by reference, call by copy restore, and call by name. So the first one is call by value, which is typically used by programming languages like Pascal and C, where here the actual parameters are evaluated and their R values, that is right hand side values, are passed to the called procedures. The implementation here is a formal parameter is treated like a local name. So the storage for the formals is in the activation record of the called procedure. The caller evaluates the actual parameters and places their R values in the storage of the formals. So example is C and Pascal, where if you have a function like this, int a comma int b, and that is going to swap two variables, and I have a main function here which is going to be declaring two variables a and b, and there is it's a call to swap. So what happens here is 1 comma 2 is passed, but this is passed as a value, meaning that the calling stack will basically have the values 1 comma 2. So what this function does is takes in the calling stack, it is trying to swap 1 comma 2, but once the function returns, the calling stack is gone. Now where is the calling stack? The calling stack is available as an activation record. So once the function returns, the activation record is gone, therefore the values which has been swapped is also gone. So therefore in this scenario of call by value, this will not take effect, the swap will basically not take effect. Now the next version is called as call by reference, where it is also called as call by address or call by location. the caller passes to the called procedure a pointer to the storage address of each actual parameter. Okay, it is not passed as a value, but it is passed as an address. Again here the address is going to be a value, but since the function knows it's going to get an address rather than a value. So actual parameter must have an address. Only variables make sense, an expression will not basically make sense in that case. So this is a C++ version, which is actually a tweaked C version program only, where I am saying it is a star A and a star B, that is the arguments which you are going to get are going to be addresses. Okay. Now what happens is, again the two the same call, but again it is going to be passed as addresses, but the calling stack, what it does is it knows it's an address, so it's going to change here in the main function itself rather than in the calling stack. So once the calling stack is done also, this basically is going to be preserved. Okay. The third one is called as call by copy restore. It's a hybrid between call by value and call by reference. Okay. The actual parameters are evaluated and its R values are passed to the called procedure as in call by value. When the control returns, the R value of the formal parameters are copied back into the L value of the actuals. So this is what is different as call by reference. So this is the example, swap I of a comma I works correctly using copy restore, because a of I is anyway going to be a address computation, okay, that is passed to I. So this is copy restore's example and is typically used by Fortran. The last one is call by name. It is defined by the copy rule of ALGOL language, where a procedure is considered as if it were a macro. The actual parameters are literally substituted here with the formals as in the case of macro expansion, and the local names of the called procedures are kept distinct, that is it could be renamed also. Actual parameters are surrounded by parentheses to preserve integrity. So this is the situation. So f of a plus f of b is your assignment to x. Here a comma b are expressions, and substitution of expressions a and b in the formal parameter leads to call by name. Okay, that is substituting just called as call by name. So that is what we have seen in this particular module, where we have looked at the control flow statements involving switch case construct, how to generate 3 address code for the same was also discussed, and how to deal with the mixed mode operations for arithmetic computation is also discussed in this module. We also looked at some runtime storage management in terms of static and heap memory allocation, and then the various parameter passing techniques in terms of call by reference, call by value, call by copy restore and call by name was also discussed. Thank you.